Hi, and welcome to Sparkle Art.
And welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a quick art journal page. I'm going to use some beautiful products from some of my favourite artists. I have some of the lovely napkins from Davenport. Now these are from her new release, and if you're looking for them online you'll need to look for the name collage papers, but they really are just like table napkins. So there's some beautiful designs in here that I'm going to use. I have some of the gorgeous Fowler face stencils, and these are from Fowler, of course. And today I'm going to use the front-facing stencil, and of course some of Jane Davenport's aqua pastels. These are water-activated crayons, and you can use them either as a crayon for fine detail, or activate these with water or a water brush to use as a colouring medium. So I'm going to give these a go today. And the first thing I'm going to do is add some of these beautiful napkins to my page. Now you'll notice that I'm going to use a page that has some bleed through from the other side. The napkins are perfect for covering this. And I'm going to use some Liquitex matte gel to stick them down. So to start this process, all I have to do is peel the backing layer off the napkin and use that matte medium to stick the napkin down and cover the paper. Now you can throw the backing paper away or keep it and use it for texture somewhere else. So I've organised the background, and yes, it's going to be pretty bright, but that's okay because I'm working over the top with paint so that I can position my face somewhere and have an interesting sweep of hair. So the next step is to just glue this all down. Now, with a background this bright, there's really only one thing I can do with this page, and I'm going to make it a Frida kahlo page. So as sometimes happens, the matte medium has intensified some of the colours on here. So the oranges are more intense, the pinks, the purples and the greens seem to have stayed reasonably true, but this bottom section has just gone crazy neon. So I'll have to figure out a way to deal with that somehow. But really all I need to do at the moment is figure out where I want my face. Now I'm using the Ceram Coat Santa's Flesh. Alright, so I've used my beautiful face stencil from Kylie to create the shape of my Frida girl. And I've added 2 coats of the acrylic paint in Santa's Flesh. Now while this hasn't covered everything perfectly, I'm also going to add more colour over the top, so that won't matter, and this is just a nice base coat. So I've got a nice dry background, and here comes the fun part. Well, fun, scary, bit of everything. I've got my face stencil, and it's fitting perfectly over the top of my little drawn head here. So now it's time to start fleshing out the page. Now to do this, I'm going to do a few strange things, like covering my background, because as you'll admit, it's fairly eye-catching, so it's going to detract from whatever I do with my little face here. So basically you're going to see bits of my background peeking through, but not as it looks at the moment. So let me get started. I think I'd like to outline my face in something that I can later erase if I want to. So now next I'm going to use stencil from Jane Davenport's range, and this is actually the Butterfly Effect Book stencils, and you get one washi holder in the pack and one journal book stencil, and it's got all these awesome flowers on there, and you can either snip it apart along the middle here, or you can leave it in your journal and use it as a little sort of on-the-go stencil. So I'm going to use this to add flowers into Frida's hair, and I'm going to use one of the Jane Davenport mermaid markers to add the colour here. Okay, and that's just the addition of the base shape of the flower. Now there's a couple of other flowers here I can use for additional little sort of roses and things. And because of the matte medium underneath, these aren't exactly going to dry beautifully, but we can make that work. Alright, now I'm just going to blot this just so I don't make a huge mess, because all I really need is the outline of the shape on my paper right now. Now I'm going to take some creative license with Frida's hair, so I'm just going to quickly sketch what I think the hair shape might be like onto the paper. And to do that, I'm going to use a white chalk marker or a white pastel marker. But instead of the little sort of top knot thing, I'm just going to go a little bit crazy so that we can see some of this beautiful coloured background here. And the great thing about working with the chalk pencil is that I can either rub it out or blend it into my background when I'm done. And then from here, I'm going to do like a little hair swoop. But I think I want it to follow this beautiful purple here. Okay, so that's going to get me a nice sort of like sweep of hair here. Room to write some text down the bottom here. And then I can make a few graffito marks in the top. And I'll show you what that is when I start doing it. I'm going to use some white gesso, and then I can either use anything with sort of a rubbery point. You could even use the end of a paintbrush if you have to, or a toothpick. Just use what you've got and make some marks. So the first thing to do is to grab some of your gesso, whichever brand you have, and add it to your background. So you want to use the white to sort of block off all of these overly coloured areas. And then while the gesso is still wet, use some kind of an implement to scrape into the gesso and reveal little bits of the pattern underneath. Now, because you need to make sure the gesso is still wet to do this, you might want to work on a small area at a time and just go a little bit slowly. Now you can add the gesso as thick or thin as you like. You can use it to highlight some bits and cover others. And then, as I said, make little marks in the gesso. And that reveals some of the pattern without being too overwhelming. And of course you can add as much or as little of that graffito as you like in whatever patterns that you think you might like on your piece of artwork. Just let some of the background peek through without taking over. Now I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want that to be too bright. I want it really to focus on my face here. And I'm just going to do that same technique for the rest of the background where I think it will work. Now there's lots of little circles up here in her hair, so I just wanted to echo this down in the piece a little bit. So I've just sort of scraped a few circles into the wet paint, just to echo the pattern, help it match a bit more. Kind of like doodling, except it's drawing into the paint and not on top of it. It's kind of fun. All right, so I think I have added enough white to the background to be able to highlight the image. So you can still see all of the collage underneath peeking through. It's just muted. Now I'm going to need to let this dry before I keep going. So let me just pause for a second and come back. So I'm at the part where I just have to go for it. And my paint is dry and it's ready to add the detail to take this from what it is now to a finished page. So I'm going to start with Jane's Aqua Pastels. Now I haven't used these before, so this will be a bit of a test. And they come in a beautiful range of colours, but there isn't a black, so I will need to use something else to help embellish her hair, but that's okay. So I'm going to start out a little bit gently and apply them with a water brush. I know you can apply them directly from the pastel as well, and I might try that in a few areas and see how it goes. Now I don't know exactly how soluble these are, so it'll be interesting to see, especially over the gesso, how this sort of turns out. I suppose all I can do is just play and see what happens. So over paint, the aqua pastels dissolve quite well, and I'm not getting sort of any weird lumps or anything. Now for a heavier layer of the aqua pastel, I'm going to try adding it directly from the pastel itself. And it doesn't seem to give a much heavier layer than applying it directly. Also good to know. Okay, so I'm going to try adding a little bit of cheek colour. Let's see how that goes. Quite subtle there. Now you'll notice I'm trying to use quite strong colours for Frida because that hair is just so vibrant that she's going to need to be able to hold her own against those stronger colours on the page. So I'm going to have to be a little bolder than I normally would with my colour choices. But it's always something new to learn, isn't there? Just going to fill in some of these white areas. Now, even if it doesn't stay this colour, at least they'll have some colour on them. So this one is, strangely enough, Dali, and that previous colour was Laurentian. There's a colour called Frida. I think I'll have to use this one, don't you? I'm finding it's taking a little bit of time to get the aqua pastels sort of going with the water brush. But once they are, the colours are really pretty. I'm going to give Michelangelo a go next. This one's Van Gogh. So I'm just using the dark blue of the Van Gogh to outline things a little. The eyes, the jawline, and I'm just using really light strokes to add it. And I'm also going to start colouring in the eyes. Now I know that the eyes need to be a dark brown, so just to start getting colour on here, I'm adding the same blue, which is the Van Gogh. And of course Frida's known for those wild eyebrows. Alright, so I'm actually pretty happy with how the base of the face is going now. I can always add more details and make it prettier, but I've got the base layer of colours and I'm really quite liking how that looks. Now, on camera, that blue in the eyebrows and the eyes is a lot more cobalt looking, a lot stronger than it is on paper, but I actually kind of like that too. So, I don't know, not much I'm not liking so far. I'm just going to try and add a little bit of this blue around the jawline and then blend it out into that pink so that it's not quite so obvious. There we go. Now, I think that might be it for the aqua pastels because the rest of it is that brightly coloured that I think these might be lost over the top. So I have my little paint mixture in here that I often use, and it's the fine line applicator. Now, as always, before using this, just check the flow on a little piece of scrap paper because sometimes it can be a little aggressive. And then I'm going to use this paint mixture just to outline the design that I've got in the hair. Now, I'm also going to use it on the flower just to cement the flower pattern into the design. Now at this point I've got no real idea where some of these flower petals are, so I'm just winging it. And in all honesty, it doesn't really matter that much anyway. It's just for visual effect. Now that I've got the flower patterns on here, I'm basically just going to use exactly the same thing to have a play in the hair. Now honestly, I'm not feeling like I need to do all that much extra to the hair. Maybe add a little shading and darken it in places. But for me, this is about as much as that needs. Now while I'm at it, I'm going to be brave and add a Frida quote. And the one I'm choosing is, "Nothing is absolute, everything changes." Now, There's not actually a heap more I want to do to this page apart from adding a little detail and a little shading, because after looking at it overnight, I kind of like it the way it is. Now, I'm not so crazy about my handwriting here, but I never am, and I just wanted to put this quote on the page. So I've got pretty much my whole set of Derwent ink tints from the 24 tin in front of me, and I'm going to use these to add a little bit of extra colour and shading before I add the finishing touches with some black and white pens. So all I'm doing with these is adding them dry and then activating them with a water brush, because as ink these will set and won't then reactivate afterwards. Now, they do sometimes behave a little bit differently when used over the top of matte medium and paint like I'm doing here, so they might not be quite as permanent as they might be on paper, but they're still going to be beautiful. So I'm going to start with Shiraz, Poppy Red and Chilli Red, just to add some colour in my flower here. Now for this piece I'm more interested in I can't say anything this morning. I must need a coffee. For this, I want it to be colourful and fun rather than perfect. So I'm not exactly using my best shading techniques on the flower. I'm just adding some colour. Now, if I'd wanted the colours to be brighter and more intense, I could have coloured this flower in with gesso before going over the background, which would have let the colours shine through more. But I'm kind of interested to see how this will look. Okay, so I have my trusty water brush and a piece of paper towel at the ready. I'm just going to activate the Derwent Ink Tense pencils with the water brush. These are activating to the most gorgeous, almost creamy consistency over everything I've laid down underneath, and adding colour without covering all of the pattern. They're actually turning out even better than I was expecting over this, so pretty happy here. Oops, see, I forgot to add colour to this little section here. So I'll just use some of what's on my brush to colour it up. Okay, and now we have red flowers in the hair. Now I'm just going to wait for that colour to dry before moving on, because as we all know, if I add anything next to that red and the two bleed, it's probably not going to look that great. Okay, so that red is almost dry, not completely, but almost. So now I'm going to add leaf green and apple green. Okay, that green's not covering quite as well as I had hoped. It's going a bit of a khaki colour too, so I might just take some of that off and just stick with the apple green, which was the brighter one. So you can also apply this directly from the tip of the pencil. Doesn't hurt the pencil at all. Okay, that's a bit brighter. Time to add a little darkness to her hair. So I'm just going to add some ink black. Now I'm not trying to colour the hair here. I'm just trying to add a little bit of extra shape and sort of something extra to it. Sorry if you can hear my little cat going off in the background at the moment. She's having one of those mornings. Now the ink black is quite a strong colour, so you will need that little piece of paper towel to wipe any off your brush when it starts to get too overwhelming. So let's just start with this. And of course, while it's wet, if you feel like you would prefer it to be coloured, you can blot this off. But once it's dry, these Inktense pencils are made to stay. And what you can, of course, do is blend it to the middle and then clean the water brush off and use it to remove sections. Or you can also blot with your paper towel to get the same effect. So basically I'm trying to dirty this up. I don't want it looking too perfect or too staged or too anything. I mean, Frida's known for her black hair, but I would still like to have a little bit of colour in mind, so this just kind of allows me to do that. And if you'd like to soften the edges, just clean off the water brush and go over where the edge meets the rest of your paper. Now that her hair is a little darker in places, she's beginning to look a little bit more Frida-esque. And I might wait for this to dry and then add a little bit more in. Or I might not wait for it to dry and still add a bit more in. The beautiful thing about these Inktense pencils is it doesn't really matter. And the great thing about adding a bit of extra dark in is it lets me bring in a bit of extra light towards the end. Just for some little highlights. I think we're getting somewhere. Now, while the hair's drying, I can work on the face a little bit. And I don't want to do too much. Basically, I'm going to add some poppy red to the lips. Then add a little of the fuchsia, just to give the hint of a chin. I don't want to make it too prominent. Add a little bit just around the eyes here. Now the beauty of these pencils is even if you don't activate them, you've still got the pencil that you've added. So it makes it really easy to create beautiful shapes. I'm also going to use some of this fuchsia in the eyes. And then I'm going to add some browns in willow and baked earth. And then I've got a colour called bark. And I'm just going to use that to add a little definition to the eyebrows. Now I may or may not activate this colour. I can always just leave it as pencil. But I've actually become quite fond of that blue base in the eyebrows, so I'm just trying to keep it. I'm also going to use the fuchsia just to add a tiny little sort of lip dip thing. And then maybe a couple of little shadows. Don't want to go too crazy though. Okay, back to my trusty water brush. Frida kahlo. I'm just basically having fun and having a play. Oops, too much water. Still too much water. Now that I'm finished adding water, I can add a few other little touches with my Sharpie marker and my Wink of Stella clear sparkly brush pen. So it won't be a lot because I kind of like where she's at already. But you know me, I can't resist a hint of sparkle. Must not have shaken this well enough. And perhaps a little white Sharpie marker. Now have your water brush at the ready, because if the Sharpie turns out to be too overwhelming, you can then use the water brush to blend it out. I just want this for a few little highlights, that's all. Now all I really have to do is wait for the eyebrows and the Sharpie marker to dry, and I can add a tiny bit of pencil work, and I think this will be finished. Okay, the eyebrows are finally dry, finally, and I'm just going to give her a sweep of upper eye with a little brush pen. Now I can use the same brush pen to add some eyelashes if I like, or darken the underneath, but I'm just going to add a few little eyebrow, just very lightly. And the nice thing is if any of it turns out too dark, just blot it while it's still wet, and you can adjust it. A little bit of a lilt at the edge of each eye, and then wait for that to dry. So my page isn't quite perfect, but I love it anyway, and I really don't care. So I've got the beautiful bit of sgraffito in the background, that white gesso that's letting a little bit of the design peek through, but covering it up and allowing that face to stand forward is just, I really quite like the contrast. A little bit of darkness in the hair, just so that you get that Frida feel, the flowers, and that cute little face created with Kylie's stencil are just all making me very, very happy right now. And when you get up close, You can see the teeny little bit of shimmer on here. Now, it's not a great deal. I could have gone in and added gold foil and all sorts of exciting things, but I was just trying to keep it reasonably simple. And then, of course, you've got the little face with the nice little pink cheeks. They're not even. And you know what? I don't mind because the overall look is what I was going for. And I think I have achieved something that looks a little bit like Frida kahlo. Now I can pick it to pieces and see where I've got little bumps and lumps and all sorts of things, but I kind of like it the way it is. And for me, that's exactly what it's all about. So I hope this has inspired you to get out some of your collage papers or napkins or anything else that you might like and create something wild and crazy that's not perfect, but that you love. I hope you found this useful. I'll be back with more really soon.